Hello, I'm Jerry Fort. Welcome to Jungle Jerry's Treehouse. Going to finish the Magic Treehouse number 26. Good Morning, Gorillas by Mary Pope Osborne. This one right here. This is Boo Boo. Boo Boo is hiding up here in the brush. Okay. All right, so we left off at chapter 6, Good Morning, Gorillas. The pounding ended. There was silence, a long silence. Jack opened his eyes. He peeked around the tree. The silverback was sitting on the ground. His lips were curved in a smile. He looked pleased with himself. Probably pleased with himself because he made Jack soil his pants, right? Was his whole act a fake? Jack wondered. Jack didn't know whether to be scared or to laugh. The only thing he did know was he still had to get to Annie. Jack pulled out the research book. He found the gorilla chapter again. He read, "To safely get close to gorillas in the wild, it's wise to act like a gorilla yourself. Crouch down and rest on your knuckles like a gorilla. Keep your head down and act friendly." Now keep your head down and act submissive to the silverback. Otherwise, he would probably find that a threat, find it to be like a challenge. He might throw you over the trees or something. You never know. But this knows the information he's reading in the research book is probably more accurate, but Jack packed up his research book. He put his pack on his back. Then he went down on his knees. Jack took a deep breath. He smiled a friendly smile. Pressing down on his knuckles, he moved out from behind the tree. His fingers hurt as he walked on them. The silverback grunted. Ugh. Jack didn't look up. He kept smiling a friendly smile as he crawled through the brush toward the clearing. When he got to the edge of the clearing, he glanced back. The giant gorilla was following him. He was frowning, but he didn't seem about to attack. Jack kept going. He moved into the clearing, then he stopped. More gorillas were waking up. A large gorilla hugged Boo Boo as if to comfort her. When Boo Boo saw Jack, she screeched joyfully. All the other gorillas turned to look at him. They made nervous sounds. Jack's heart pounded, but he just smiled his friendly smile and kept crawling. He crawled around the gorillas and over to Annie. "Wake up," he said, shaking her. Annie yawned, then opened her eyes. "Oh, hi," she said. "Are you okay?" asked Jack. "Sure," she said. She sat up and looked around. She gasped. The gorillas were staring at Jack and Annie with bright, darting eyes. The silverback stared the hardest. "Oh, wow," said Annie. A joyful smile crossed her face. "Good morning, gorillas." Chapter 7, Eating Out. Do they have a burger joint there or something? Annie kept smiling at the gorillas. "Wow," she said. "Wow, wow, wow. Didn't you know you were sleeping next to them?" Jack asked. "No," she said. "When you didn't come back, Boo Boo led me here, but I couldn't see anything. It was too dark." Just then, Boo Boo left her mother's arms and bounded over to Annie. She climbed into Annie's lap and hugged her. Another small gorilla left his mother and ran over to Annie, too. He was about the size of a 2-year-old kid. "Ho, ho," he said. The little gorilla said that? "Oh, oh, maybe that." That's what he said. "Oh, oh." He gave Annie a playful poke. "Ho, ho, yourself," said Annie. "Hi, Ho, ho." Your name? I guess she's asking, is that your name? She tickled Ho-Ho. She tickled Boo-Boo, too. The two small gorillas made laughing sounds and fell onto their backs. The two mother gorillas laughed, too. Ha, 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 they said. I guess they're imitating Annie. Jack felt a little jealous. He wanted the gorillas to like him as well, but he didn't know how to join in the fun, so he just sighed and pulled out his notebook. He added to his gorilla behavior list, gorillas like to tickle and laugh. Suddenly he heard a low growl. Oh. He looked up. The silverback had moved closer to him. He was glaring. That big guy doesn't understand what you're doing, Annie called to Jack. He's never seen anyone taking notes before. Jack quickly put his notebook away. The giant gorilla huffed. Then he turned to his family and gave a short bark. The gorillas began lining up behind the silverback. The baby traveled in his mother's arms. Ho-Ho traveled on his mother's back. Boo-Boo and Annie held hands. They all followed the silverback out of the clearing. Come on, Annie called to Jack. Let's go with the big guy and the gang. Jack shook his head. I don't think they want me to come along, he said. Boo-Boo screeched at Jack. She held out her free hand to him. Boo-Boo wants you, said Annie. Jack smiled shyly. He took Boo-Boo's small, warm hand. Then he walked with Annie and the gorillas out of the clearing. On their ramble through the cloud forest, the gorillas found food everywhere. They munched flowers and ferns and leaves. They swallowed and burped. They munched twigs and branches and pieces of bark and bamboo. They swallowed and burped. As the gorillas ate breakfast, it started to rain again, but they didn't seem to mind. Annie didn't seem to mind either. She and Boo-Boo played tag in the drizzly woods. They ran around the trees, laughing and screeching. Jack tried to follow them, but he gave up. He was tired and cold. Shivering, he stood under a mossy tree to keep dry. While he was alone, Jack sneaked his notebook out of his pack. He made a new list. Gorilla foods. Flowers, ferns, leaves, twigs, bark, branches, and bamboo. As he wrote, he heard a low growl. Uh-oh, he got caught. Taking notes, didn't he? He looked up. What did he see? Big guy had spotted him. The silverback was standing close by. He was frowning at Jack, his lips tucked in a tight line. Sorry, said Jack. He quickly put away his notebook. Big guy kept frowning. Jack quickly tried to act like a gorilla. He went down on all fours. He tore off the leaf of a plant. He took a bite. It tasted bitter, like vinegar. Jack pretended to munch and swallow and burp. Big guy huffed, then moved on. As soon as he was gone, Jack spat out the leaf. Yuck, 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 he said, wiping his tongue. Jack felt a tap on his back. He jumped, but it was just Ho-Ho. The small gorilla offered him a twig to eat. Oh, no thanks, Ho-Ho, said Jack. Ho-Ho kept holding out the twig. Oh, okay, said Jack, politely taking it. I'll eat it later. He put the twig into his backpack. Ho-Ho's mom came over to Jack. She held some berries to his lips. No thanks, Jack said. The gorilla stared at him with a sad look. He was insulting her. She probably, was in the kitchen all day cooking those berries. Oh, okay, said Jack. He opened his mouth, and Ho-Ho's mom fed him the berries. Jack munched the berries. To his surprise, they tasted good. He swallowed and burped, just like a gorilla. This time he wasn't pretending. Boo-Boo's mom then came over to Jack. She offered him some rainwater from a cupped plant. Jack was very thirsty. He sipped the water. It tasted fresh and cold. Boo-Boo's mom took Jack's hand in her wide hand. She led him through the forest to Annie and Boo-Boo. Boo-Boo screeched happily when she saw Jack. She threw her furry arms around him. "Hi, we missed you," Annie said to Jack. "Are you having fun?" Jack smiled and nodded. Actually, he was having fun now. He didn't mind the rain so much anymore. He didn't feel so left out. Some of the gorillas really seemed to like him, he thought. They seemed to like him a lot. Chapter 8. A Special Language. The rain ended. Slowly, the feeding came to a stop. Big Guy led his family into a clearing. The tall grass sparkled with misty sunlight. The silverback lay down and tucked his arms under his head. The other gorillas gathered around him. Some beat the grasses until they were flat. Ho-Ho's mom made a bed of weed stalks for Ho-Ho. Boo-Boo's mom made a bed of leaves. She made a bed of leaves for Boo-Boo. Then she made 2 extra beds for Jack and Annie. They lay down with all the gorillas to take their naps. Jack used his backpack for a pillow. Lying on his leafy bed, Jack watched the mother of the baby gorilla groom her small baby. The mother parted his hair and searched through it, picking at his skin now and then. The baby soon wiggled free and crawled around in the grass. His mother's gaze then rested on Annie. She moved over to Annie and gently grabbed one of her pigtails. She studied it carefully. "What are you doing?" Annie asked. "She's looking for bugs, I think," said Jack. "Oh, yuck," said Annie, sitting up. Jack laughed. Just then the baby's mother reached for him. "Oops, no thanks, no bugs on me," he said, and he sat up too. The mother gorilla lay back on the grass and closed her eyes. Her baby crawled over to Annie. "Hi, little guy," Annie said tenderly. She picked up the baby and stroked his head. The baby smiled at her and closed his eyes. While all the gorillas napped, Jack sneaked the book out of his pack. He found the gorilla chapter. He read softly to Annie. "Gorillas are very smart. A captive gorilla named Coco has even learned sign language. Sign language is a special language used by people who cannot hear. Coco can say..." "Can say what?" Annie said loudly. "Sign language? A special language." Her voice woke Boo-Boo and Ho-Ho. They sat up and rubbed their eyes. "So," said Jack. "Morgan's secret rhyme," said Annie. "Don't you remember? She repeated the rhyme. To find a special kind of magic in worlds so far apart, speak a special language. Talk with your hands and heart." "Oh, yeah," said Jack. "I even know a little sign language," said Annie. "In school, we learned how to sign. I love you." Annie held up a closed hand. Slowly, she lifted her thumb, index finger, and little finger. She showed the sign to Boo-Boo and Ho-Ho. "I love you," she said slowly. The small gorillas looked curious. Jack made the sign too. "I love you," he said to Boo-Boo and Ho-Ho. The 2 little gorillas stared at Annie and Jack. Then both of them held up their hands. They tried to make the same sign. "They love us too," said Annie. "Wow," said Jack. He glanced over at Big Guy. The silverback's eyes were open. He was watching them. Jack quickly closed the book. To his relief, the giant gorilla turned over. "Well," Annie said with a sigh, "I guess that does it. We spoke a special language," said Jack. "We talked with our..." Before he could finish his sentence, Boo-Boo pushed him. "Whoa," said Jack. Ho-Ho held his little arms above his head. He reared back and charged at Jack. With a flying tackle, he knocked Jack over. "What's going on?" said Jack. "They want to play with you," said Annie. Boo-Boo jumped on Jack and put him in a headlock. Jack broke free from the 2 small gorillas. He jumped up and dashed into the forest. You know, that reminds me of these videos that my wife has been showing me on YouTube, I think it is. She's found this big silverback gorilla. He's the daddy of he has 2 wives actually. And so there's a lot of little kids. And they're all getting on the big silverback, crawling on him, pulling on his hair. And they're all biting him. They got some big teeth, some sharp teeth. They're biting their daddy, and he grabs her arm, kind of, does that to their arms and their sides, and he's not hurting them. He's just playing with them. And she showed me this one video of one female gorilla with the baby on her back walking, and then another female gorilla, I guess what they said was that's the other wife, went and attacked the one carrying the baby. And as soon as she attacked that mother carrying the baby, that big silverback, well, he'd come in like a charging bull, and he grabbed that female that attacked her and pushed her down to the ground, holding her down. Just like, and then he kind of come down there and he was kind of kissing her a little bit, but he might have been saying something too, like in, gorilla language, you calm down, bad woman. I don't know, but she stayed there for a long time, like, ooh, that was close. But yeah, he wasn't, like aggressive. He was just kind of rough, to get her off the other female and to keep her kind of held down, like while she calmed down or something. But it's pretty interesting to see. Boo Boo and Ho Ho charged after him. Annie carried Little Guy and followed. She laughed as the small gorillas looked for Jack. Jack hid behind a tree. He pushed his glasses into place. He waited for Boo Boo. In a moment, she walked by. Boo! Jack shouted, jumping out. Boo Boo screeched and leaped straight up in the air. Jack cracked up laughing. Boo Boo didn't laugh, though. She bit her lip. She hid her face behind her hands. Oh, Boo Boo, said Annie, don't be scared. She gently put the baby on the ground. She reached out to comfort Boo Boo. Boo Boo wrapped her arms around Annie's neck. She buried her furry head in Annie's shoulder. Jack was just playing, said Annie. Boo Boo raised her head. She looked at Jack over Annie's shoulder. Friends? He asked softly. Boo Boo stuck her tongue out at him. Jack laughed. Boo Boo showed her teeth in a big smile. Friends? Said Jack. Just then, Ho Ho started screeching. Jack and Annie looked around. Ho Ho was pointing into the bushes. Where's Little Guy? Said Annie. She and Jack dashed around the shrubs. The baby had crawled to a tree. He was looking up at a branch. A huge, sleek cat with black fur was sitting on the branch. His pale green eyes stared down at the baby gorilla. He looked hungry. A black leopard, breathed Jack. The leopard leaped lightly down from his perch. He faced Little Guy. The baby looked scared. No, cried Annie. She ran over to the baby gorilla and scooped him into her arms. The leopard let out a snarl. He lowered his head and started slowly toward Annie and the baby. Jack panicked. He didn't know what to do at first. Then he remembered Big Guy's act. Jack took a deep breath. When he let it out, he made a loud hooting sound. He tore out from the brush, hooting like a silverback. He ran between Annie and the leopard. Ooh, that was brave. I'll show you this part before I start reading so you can kind of know what's going on. Jack doesn't make a very big silverback, does he? Jack grabbed a tree limb and shook it. He ripped leaves from branches. See, he's acting aggressive. He cupped his hands. He beat his chest. Rarg, he roared. Rarg! Then Jack leaned over and charged back and forth past the leopard. Finally, he threw himself on his belly. He began bashing the ground with his palms. He bashed and bashed and bashed. Jack, Annie called. Jack! Jack looked up. He's gone, Annie said in a quiet voice. The leopard's gone. He left a while ago. He's been doing that all this time when the leopard was already gone. Oh, said Jack. He sat up. He pushed his glasses into place. He looked around, then he smiled. Chapter 9. Goodbye, gorillas. Jack couldn't stop smiling. He had scared off a leopard. Boo Boo and Ho Ho stared at Jack with awe. Annie looked at him with awe, too. When did you learn to do that? She asked. Before Jack could answer, he heard a rustling in the brush. Then Big Guy stepped out from the shrubs. The giant gorilla walked silently over to Annie. He took Little Guy from her and put the baby on his back. Then he touched Annie's cheek gently. Oh, like, they kind of do this, I think. Annie grinned at him. Boo Boo and Ho Ho ran to Big Guy and clung to his legs. The giant gorilla barked at the small ones, directing them to come with him. As he walked past Jack, Big Guy stopped. Uh-oh. He said in a low voice. He reached out toward Jack. Jack ducked, but the silverback patted him on the head. Good little human. Then he and the small gorillas moved out of sight. Jack felt as if the top of his head were glowing. Wow, he whispered. Did you see what he just did? Yeah, said Annie. He must have watched the show you put on. He was proud of you. He may have been, yeah, he's in the bush. He come out of the bush. He might have been watching to see, how things were going to turn out. And he was going to step in if that leopard was going to attack anybody, probably. Well, he was proud of you too, Jack said modestly. Annie nodded, smiling. I guess it's time to leave now, she said. Leave, said Jack. We have to say goodbye now, said Annie. Excuse me. Goodbye, said Jack. He didn't want to say goodbye to the gorillas. He loved them. They were totally great. Yeah, Annie said softly. Come on. She led the way back to the shrubs, around the trees, to the clearing. They found all the gorillas awake. Some were stretching and yawning. Others were munching on grass or leaves. The baby was back in his mother's arms. Boo Boo and Ho Ho were chattering away to their moms. They're probably telling them what I did, Jack thought. He and Annie walked over to Big Guy and stood in front of him. The other gorillas gathered around. We have to go now, Annie said to all of them. We have to say goodbye, said Jack. Thanks for letting us be a part of your family, said Annie. She and Jack held up their hands and waved. The gorillas looked sad. They murmured soft sounds. Big Guy lifted his hands in the air as if he were about to wave. But instead, the silverback raised his thumbs, his index finger, and his little finger. I love you, the giant gorilla signed. Look at that. Jack couldn't believe his eyes. Annie signed back, I love you. Jack signed too. The silverback stared at them for a long moment with a gentle, shy look. Then he turned away and gave a short bark to his family. Oh, gosh. They kept talking about, the gorillas taking naps in here. It's making me want to take a nap. All the gorillas lined up behind him. The baby's mother held her baby close. Ho Ho rode piggyback on his mom. Boo Boo held her mom's hand. The silverback started away from the clearing. The others followed. Boo Boo was the only one who looked back. She screeched and waved at Jack and Annie. Then she walked away out of sight. Jack couldn't talk. His heart was too full. He took a few steps in the direction of the gorillas. Hey, Annie said softly, you're going the wrong way. Jack looked back at her. The treehouse is over there, she said. She pointed in the opposite direction, at the treehouse peeking out from the fog. Jack sighed. Then he turned and started to follow her out of the clearing. Oh, don't forget this, said Annie. She leaned over and picked up Jack's backpack from the grass. She handed it to him. Thanks, he said. They kept walking. And don't forget this, said Annie. She picked up Jack's jacket from under a tree. She handed it to him. Thanks, said Jack. He tied his jacket around his waist. They kept walking. And don't forget these, said Annie. She pointed to the flashlight and umbrella. They lay on the grass under the wide, mossy limbs of a fat tree. Annie picked them up and carried them herself. I think Jack wasn't thinking about all those, material things. He just experienced something amazing with the gorillas and made friends with them and is going to miss them. So he wasn't thinking about all those things to take back. It started to drizzle again just as she and Jack got to the rope ladder. They climbed up into the treehouse. When they got inside, they looked out the window. Jack hoped to catch one last glimpse of the gorilla family, but there was nothing to see. A white mist covered the cloud forest. Annie picked up the Pennsylvania book. She pointed to a picture of Frog Creek, and I'm getting ready to yawn. Oh, goodness. I wish we could go home, she said. Suddenly, a joyous screech rang out. The happy, wild sound shot through the white mist, through the cool rain, straight into Jack's heart. He opened his mouth to answer the call of the gorillas, but it was too late. The wind began to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. A special magic. Tap, tap, tap. Think it was like that? No, it was the rain. It was like this. Jack opened his eyes. The Frog Creek woods were still dark and rainy. We're home, Annie said. Jack sighed. I miss them already, he said. Me too, said Annie. Did you take a lot of notes on their habits and behavior? Jack shrugged. I listed a few things about them, he said, but sometimes lists don't tell you much. You have to love gorillas to really know them. Yeah, that's right, said Annie. Jack opened his backpack. He pulled out their research book and put it in the corner. Then he pulled out the twig that Ho-Ho had given him. He smiled as he showed it to Annie. I promised Ho-Ho I'd eat this later, he said, but I think we should save it for Morgan instead. Good idea, said Annie. It'll prove to her that we found a special magic. Yeah, gorilla magic, said Jack. The magic of all animals, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. He placed the twig next to the scrolls they'd brought back from old England. Let's go, said Annie. She started down. Jack pulled on his backpack. He put the flashlight in his pack. Then he grabbed the umbrella and followed Annie. They started through the Frog Creek woods. It was still cool and dark and rainy. Jack didn't mind, though. He didn't put on his jacket. He didn't take out the flashlight. He didn't put up the umbrella. Jack felt as if he weren't completely human yet. There was still a bit of gorilla left in him. Ho, ho, he said in a low voice. Actually, it was ho, ho, ho. Boo, boo, Annie said back. Ha, 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 they said together. Okay, let's see. Want to hear some more facts about Jack and Annie and you? More facts for Jack and Annie and you. Gorillas are the biggest members of the group of animals we call primates. Other primates include chimpanzees, orangutans, gibbons, baboons, monkeys, and humans. All gorillas live in Africa. There are 3 groups of gorillas: western lowland gorillas, eastern lowland gorillas, and mountain gorillas. Mountain gorillas are the largest gorillas. Mountain gorillas are the largest gorillas. They have longer hair and longer jaws and teeth. Longer teeth than lowland gorillas. Mountain gorillas live in the volcanic mountains of Virunga in East Central Africa. The word Virunga means a lonely mountain that reaches to the clouds. Gorillas are mainly herbivores or plant eaters. They keep on the move so they will not deplete a feeding area. A silverback gorilla can eat up to 50 pounds of forest vegetation in only one day. Endangered species. All gorillas are on the endangered species list, but the ones most threatened are the mountain gorillas. Fewer than 650 still live in the wild. None live in captivity. Well, that one my wife was showing me looked like it was in a zoo or something. A woman named Diane Fossey lived for almost 20 years with the mountain gorillas. During her life, she fought very hard for their protection. Gorillas and American Sign Language. Since 1971, a lowland gorilla named Coco has been part of a gorilla language project in California. Gorillas will never be able to talk like people because their vocal cords cannot make the necessary range of sounds, but a woman named Penny Patterson taught Coco the gorilla how to use American Sign Language. American Sign Language is a special language using hand gestures. It is primarily used by people who are unable to hear. Coco has learned to make more than 1,000 signs, and she understands about 2,000 English words. She proves that gorillas have extraordinary intelligence, as well as many thoughts and feelings similar to those of humans. Interesting. All right. That was a fun book. Let's see what our next one is. Is it? Nope. I think it's this one right here. Yeah. Number 27. Thanksgiving on Thursday. Mary Pope Osborne. Excuse me. All right. Well, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Wow, 30 minutes. Whew. We had a lot to read, didn't we? We'll see you all in the next one for Thanksgiving on Thursday. It's not that time yet, is it? Bye.